ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टां स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वापदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरु श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरुन् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातां सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनासहितं श्रीकृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणा ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषशून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। नमो महावदन्याय कृष्णप्रेमपदायते कृष्णाय कृष्णचैतन्य नामने गौतसे नमः। वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धु जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमस्तुते। तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौभक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. So we welcome all of you for today's Bhakti Shastri class. We recently started Nectar devotion, and in the last session, which was an introduction to Nectar devotion, we kind of read through Preface. In Preface, Prabhupada talks about the life and history of Srila Rupa Goswami. Along with that, there is also discussion about the purpose. Why did Srila Prabhupada chose to give a summary study of Bhakti Rasa Sindhu or Nectar devotion. And then there is a third subject matter which is highlighted in the preface, is the definition of the word Bhakti Rasa amrita Sindhu. So that's what we're going to take a look at it. So let's start with our discussion for today. So starting with the prayers, as we had done it last time. नाना शास्त्र विचानेक निपुनो सधर्म संस्थापको लोकानां हितकारिणो त्रिभुवने मान्यो शरण्याकरो राधा कृष्ण पदारविंद्र भजना नंदेन मतालिकयो वंदे रूप सनातनो रघुजुगो श्री जीव गोपालको. And the meaning is as follows. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the six Goswamis, namely Sri Rupa Goswami, Srila Sanatana Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatt, Sri Raghunath Das, Sri Jiva Goswami, and Sri Gopal Bhatt Goswami, who are very expert in scrutinizingly studying all the revealed scriptures with the aim of establishing eternal religious principles for the benefit of all human beings. Thus, they are honored all over the three worlds and they're worth taking shelter of because they're absorbed in the mood of the gopis and are engaged in the transcendental loving service of Shri Radha and Krishna. And this is one more prayer which we'll try to learn as we continue with our discussions on Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which is written by Srila Narottam Das Thakur. Rupa Raghunatha Pade Aibe Akuti Kabe Hamabu Jabo Sejugala Priti. When I am eager to understand the literature given by the Goswamis, then I shall be able to understand the transcendental loving affairs of Shri Radha and Krishna. With that as a little background, let's start with our today's discussion, where we're gonna cover preface. We are having today's discussion only for 1.5 hours, just like last time. So in today's discussion, we'll try to cover the preface as well as the first 8 to 10 verses of introduction as given by Srila Rupa Goswami. So in brief, last time we had a discussion on the following topic. First, we had discussed the life and the significance of Srila Rupa Goswami. Who is Srila Rupa Goswami? Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. The very first point we discussed about Srila Rupa Goswami is one who understands the innermost desires of Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Second, regarding Rupa Goswami, in context of us, it is said we are Rupa Anuga. We have discussed this point, what is Rupa Anuga means. Anuga means followers of Srila Rupa Goswami. Why? Because it is described that Rupa Goswami is Rupa Manjari, and she is the head or the leader of all the Manjaris, and other Manjaris are our other Goswamis and Acharyas in our parampara, like that. The fourth point which we discussed briefly, touching about the life of Srila Rupa Goswami, just like Lord Shri Krishna instructed Brahma instructed Narada, Narada instructed Vyasadeva, to compile Vedic literatures or Srimad Bhagavatam. Similarly, Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu personally instructed Rupa Goswami to reveal the Bhakti Tattva. For 10 days, they sat at Ashwamedh Ghat at Prayagraj, and there for 10 days, Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructed Rupa Goswami on the principles and on the secrets of Bhakti. And like that, Srila Rupa Goswami went on to compile literatures describing about the importance of Bhakti Tattva, or extracting the Bhakti Tattva principles from various scriptures, like that. Along with this, we also discussed about the Prabhupada purposes in writing the Nectar devotion, wherein we had discussed about the connection between Srila Prabhupada and Srila Rupa Goswami. We had discussed briefly about Srila Prabhupada choosing to stay at Radha Damodar, and how Srila Prabhupada would every day pray to Srila Rupa Goswami. In fact, it is described which Srila Prabhupada agreed, and in fact spoke about it, that how Srila Rupa Goswami once in his dream had appeared and had instructed Srila Prabhupada, or rather inspired and encouraged to go to the West and share the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And the third very important point that we discussed last time was Srila Prabhupada called Nectar devotion as Law Book of ISKCON. Law Book of ISKCON, it's like a constitution is defined. Law Book of ISKCON, which means this is how, based on the principles given in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, our whole movement will be governed. Our whole movement, the principle is Bhakti Yoga, how to practice Bhakti. And what are the guidelines for it? They all are given in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Therefore, this book is one of the foremost book, very, very essential book to be read by practicing devotees. Of course, when there are newcomers, we give them Bhagavad Gita. We give them the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. You can give them the whole canto, whole Srimad Bhagavatam. This is not the book which is generally given to newcomers. However, when somebody takes to the practice of bhakti, this is the must read, one of the most essential books to be read to understand how to perform bhakti and how to make progress in the path of bhakti. A very, very crucial discussion which is conducted here. Now, Prabhupada said this is the law book of ISKCON, which means it also teaches us, helps us, or gives us the intelligence to discriminate between what is bhakti, what is not bhakti. Some of you, most of you, or maybe all of you might have heard about sahajyas. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur talks about such asampradayas, quite a lot in his writings, apasampradaya, like that. So how do we know who is actually a practicing devotee or who is faking or who is not sincerely practicing? Because once a person comes in contact with ISKCON or ISKCON devotees, our external changes very quickly. People don't mind it, at least in India. So difficult to put on tilak. Maybe put on the dhoti kurta and whatever the simple attire the mothers wear. But that's only an external change. But how do we know? And in fact, on top of it, you'll see they'll have a bead bag hanging in the neck. And how many of you have seen a lot of time people are walking around, or maybe during the Bhagavatam class, they have their hands in the bead bag and they're chanting. There's some people who never take out their hands from the bead bag only. Yes or no? And when you see them, you might feel like, oh my goodness, what's the love for Krishna? Even in Bhagavatam class, they are just chanting the holy names of the Lord. All respect to all those who may be genuinely doing that, but it ain't so easy. I'm talking about the newcomers who you come across here and there. And you may feel like, okay, this person must be, we have heard in some random classes that this devotee must have performed some bhakti in his last life, and probably this is the last life on a very, very advanced stages of bhakti. Therefore, whenever we see him outside the house, he's always chanting, particularly in the association of devotees. So there are many factors which we get bewildered and confused. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu sets it. He sets a record straight, makes it very clear what is bhakti, what is not bhakti. In fact, introduction, will not be able to complete the introduction today. Right in the introduction, Srila Rupa Goswami defines what is pure devotion. Understanding that itself gives us a lot of relief. Actually, at least we have understood what bhakti is, theoretically, what actually it means to be. So it's a very, very important book. And what else can be said when Prabhupada himself identified and categorized this one particular book as the law book of ISKCON. In other words, the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu teaches us how to focus our heart and mind on bhakti and awaken our bhakti in a systematic way, like that. So this was the part of discussion that we had last time, and now we'll begin our discussion for today. So Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Why Srila Rupa Goswami chose to give this particular title to his writing, the Nectar devotion book. And along with that, we'll also try to a little bit discuss about how and why Srila Prabhupada chose the English transliteration of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu as Nectar of Devotion. So we'll do one thing. Okay, let me give you a summary and then we'll read out. We'll do that way. Let's go back to the slide deck. So very first thing, Bhakti. According to you, what does Bhakti mean? You have heard about word Bhakti, you must have read in Prabhupada books. If somebody asks you Bhakti, how would you define word Bhakti? Anyone? Come on, you all are doing Bhakti Shastri. You have already completed one book of Bhakti Shastri. You should definitely, everyone should have 100% hand up to say what is Bhakti. What does Bhakti stands for? Okay, let's go. Anshul Agrawal. Anshul Prabhu, go ahead. What's the definition of Bhakti?
Doing everything for the pleasure of the Lord.
Great. Very nice. Very nice. Okay. Prabhanu Krishna Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhuji, lovingly service towards the God.
Loving service to the Lord. Thank you. Madharati Manjari.
In complete surrender of your heart and mind to the lotus feet of the Supreme Absolute Truth.
Okay. How did Prabhupada define Bhakti? if there is a word bhakti, Prabhupada will give a one-word translation of bhakti in English. You are kind of giving a but I agree, it's all correct. Mother Medhavni,
Uninterrupted, unmotivated devotional service.
you made it 4 words. I said 1 word. No, that's 2 words. What would Prabhupada said? Bhakti means what? Bhakti service, and of course devotional service. Now that's the beauty of Prabhupada's writing actually. You know, bhakti. So incredibly he translated. In general, what is the general meaning of bhakti? Is devotion, agreed? That's what we know of. Prabhupada did not call it as devotion. Prabhupada called it as devotional service. Now, why devotional service? Now, bhakti means devotion. Devotion means love. And if you love somebody, you would like to serve that person? So Prabhupada, just like Srila Rupa Goswami, when he's going to give a definition of pure devotion, he does not leave any caveat or any chances of finding faults with it or any loopholes with the definition. Similarly, Prabhupada, while defining what bhakti, did not wanted any kind of a misunderstanding or any opportunities for misunderstanding. Therefore, Prabhupada completed the definition by saying bhakti means devotional service. Service is only possible when you love somebody. And devotion means love. Therefore, bhakti calls as devotional service. You got the meaning why Prabhupada chose bhakti to be devotional service. Okay? That means bhakti, devotion or loving service. Rasa. Rasa means, it's a little complicated translation. The word rasa cannot be exactly translated into English. However, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur translated rasa to a mellow. Now, if I ask you about the word rasa, what would you say? We all have heard the word rasa in Hindi, right? How many of you have drank rasana? You have drank rasana, you know. Rasa, what does it rasa means? Rasa means taste. So now Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur gives a little more, you can say a little difficult word he uses, mellow. You know. So what does rasa means? Rasa means juice, you know, taste. There is taste something. So Srila Prabhupada in his writing also translate rasa in English as mallow. Now what does it mean, mallow or the taste? Which means if there is a taste, if there is an affection in a relationship, a person naturally gets attracted towards that, isn't it? So in other words, a relationship cannot have any meaning if there is no rasa, which means if there is no attraction. And attraction comes because there is a taste in it, isn't it? Just like I asked you, how many of you drank rasana? If imagine there is no taste in rasana, would you ever drink it? In fact, there is a taste in the water. If there is no taste in the water, why would anyone drink it? Of course, water is needed for the body, whatever, those are other reasons. So here, bhakti ras. Bhakti refers to loving service. Ras, Srila Prabhupada is going to elaborate in his preface here. Rasa means there are 2 kinds of ras, mundane ras and spiritual ras. And then Srila Prabhupada defines what is mundane ras. Prabhupada says the nature of mundane or the bhautik ras is chapala sukh, bhoga tyaga. What is bhoga and tyaga? Bhoga means want to enjoy, tyaga means to give up. So if you imagine a pendulum, the 2 ends of the pendulum would be bhoga and tyaga. Bhoga means I want to enjoy, tyaga means I give up. And then in between you can find chapala sukh. Why is bhoga tyaga? Because fleeting happiness. We'll discuss about it in a short while. When we read the preface, we'll give you more elaboration of it. And then going back to the other term, amrita. So mundane ras has 2 nature, 2 aspect of it. One is bhoga tyaga, second is chapala sukh. Because of its fleeting nature, happiness is not everlasting. Therefore, tyaga, person gives up because he wants something else. And bhoga, because the desire is not fulfilled, he keeps on longing. He wants to gratify the desire for pleasure which never gets fulfilled. So he gives up and hankers for more. That is Bhoga Tyaga. So the material rasa or mundane rasa, in other words, never ever satisfy the person. So here spiritual rasa is being introduced. So bhakti rasa. Amrita, the nature of spiritual rasa or bhakti rasa is it is everlasting. It never gets destroyed. It has its different meanings. We'll see that. Amrita also means eternal, because bhakti, whatever we do in bhakti, never gets destroyed at the end of life. It continues. And the other aspect of it, which is mentioned in the commentaries by Acharyas on this particular aspect of what Amrita, bhakti also awards eternal life. So like that, bhakti rasa amrita. And finally, the last word is Sindhu. Sindhu means ocean. So, Srila Rupa Goswami, when he titles the book Bhakti Rasa Amrita Sindhu, so he makes it very clear, which we'll see in the introduction in the very first verse. The objective of this book is to allow the readers to dive into the unending ocean of bliss and spiritual happiness. And how do we gain access to that unending ocean of bliss is a subject matter of Bhagavad Gita, or subject matter of Nectar devotion. Therefore, the Nectar devotion, the very first verse begins with, who is the object? What is the objective of this book? Akhil Rasa Amrita Murti. Jahan par wherein Srila Rupa Goswami describes who is the objective of this book. That is Lord Shri Krishna, who is the embodiment of all the rasas that we shall see in a short while. So that is how Srila Rupa Goswami has given the meaning, has given the title for this book, Bhakti Rasa Amrita Sindhu. He is introducing us to an ocean which is not full of water, which is not full of salty water. It is full of Bhakti Rasa. And what is the nature of that Bhakti Rasa? Is Amrita, eternal. When one enters into this Sindhu, into this ocean, or dives into it, he gains access to unlimited happiness, eternal life, and there is no yad gatvana nivartante, no coming back. So let's take a look. Somebody would like to read out? There are a few quotations that we're going to read.
Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the Sanskrit word, we have shortcut the translation Nectar of Devotion. Rupa Goswami's purpose is to present the ocean of Bhakti Rasa. Rasa means mellow, the juice. It is just like ocean. This ocean has limitation, but that is unlimited. Nectar of Devotion, Lecture, Bombay.
Next, continue.
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu compared Bhakti to a great ocean. When he was speaking before Rupa Goswami, he said that it is just like an ocean. So I'll take a drop of it and you taste it and you will understand what is this ocean. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu described a small portion of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Bhakti, devotional service. There is a rasa, taste, and the taste is amrita, eternal.
So what is rasa? So, okay, we'll do one thing, because I have just quoted this points from Prabhupada's writing. Why don't we first read from Prabhupada's book and then we'll come back to it. All right? So, somebody wants to read. I'll let you know where, I'll tell you from where to read actually. So, please go to the preface, and we have finished the first 2 pages. First 2 pages means the first page, front and back, and in the second page, which means the first page, second part, there you have to start reading from the last line. Bhakti means devotional service.
Bhakti means devotional service. Every service has some attractive feature which drives the servitor progressively on and on. Every one of us within this world is perpetually engaged in some sort of service, and the impetus for such service is the pleasure we derive from it. Driven by affection for his wife and children, a family man works day and night. A philanthropist works in the same way for love of the greater family, and a nationalist for the cause of his country and countrymen. That force that drives the philanthropist, the householder, and the nationalist is called rasa.
So, I'll just pause here for a second. So, Prabhupada in the same, this single paragraph talks about bhakti as well as bhakti rasa. In the very first line, he defined bhakti means devotional service, and now Prabhupada is going to speak about rasa, and that is what the discussion about. where the last time said the force which drives the philanthropist, the household, and the nationalist is called rasa, a kind of a mellow, whose taste is very sweet. An attractive energy, attractive force, which makes us attracted to somebody or makes us attracted to a certain profession, anything that is called as rasa. Please go ahead, Mother.
That force that drives the philanthropist, the householder, and the nationalist is called rasa, or a kind of mellow, a relationship whose taste is very sweet. Bhakti rasa is a mellow different from the ordinary rasa enjoyed by mundane workers. Mundane workers labor very hard day and night in order to relish a certain kind of rasa, which is understood as sense gratification. The relish or taste of the mundane rasa does not long endure, and therefore mundane workers are always apt to change their position of enjoyment. A businessman is not satisfied by working the whole week. Therefore, wanting a change for the weekend, he goes to a place where he tries to forget his business activities. Then, after the weekend is spent in forgetfulness, he again changes his position and resumes his actual business activities. Material engagement means accepting a particular status for some time and then changing it. This position of changing back and forth is technically known as bhoga tyaga, which means a position of alternating sense enjoyment and renunciation. A living entity cannot steadily remain either in sense enjoyment or in renunciation. Change is going on perpetually, and we cannot be happy in either state because of our eternal constitutional position. Sense gratification does not endure for long, and it is therefore called chapala sukha, or flickering happiness. For example, an ordinary family man who works very hard day and night and is successful in giving comforts to the members of his family, thereby relishes a kind of mellow, but his whole advancement of material happiness immediately terminates along with his body as soon as his life is over. Death is therefore taken as the representative of God for the atheistic class of men. The devotee realizes the presence of God by devotional service, whereas the atheist realizes the presence of God in the shape of death. At death, everything is finished, and one has to begin a new chapter of life in a new situation, perhaps higher or lower than the last one. In any field of activity, political, social, national, or international, the results of our actions will be finished with the end of life. That is sure.
Hare Krishna. So here in this paragraph, Prabhupada talk about mundane rasa or the material rasa. Let's go a little bit with the slide deck and then I'll come back to the discussion. So rasa, Prabhupada writes, every service has some attractive feature which drives the servitor progressively on and on. That force which drives the philanthropist, household, and so forth is called as rasa. And then Prabhupada speaks about mundane rasa. Mundane rasa has two natures. One is called as chapala sukh. Chapala sukh means fleeting happiness. Just like how many of you have an experience chewing gum? You remember those days when I was a kid, there used to be bamboo, well not bamboo, boomer gum. You remember, or any other chewing gum? We have chewed it, right? So in the beginning, when you take a first bite, it really tastes. There is a nectar in it, and you keep chewing it. Then your jaw begins to pain, and there is no more juice in it. Yes or no? That is an example of a fleeting happiness. So next time when you see a chewing gum, remember the chapala sukh nature of this world. That's the point about the fleeting happiness. Then chapala sukh versus, we can do mundane rasa. Let's chapala sukh. Let's go to second is bhoga tyaga. Bhoga tyaga, just like Prabhupada gives a very beautiful example. Bhoga tyaga is like the nature of the mind. I want this, and tomorrow I don't want this. Sankalpa vikalpa, I'll do it, I will not do it. Always keep changing position. And Prabhupada gives an example. What is the concept behind weekend? Monday to Friday, person slogs very hard, looks forward for a weekend, and weekend ends. And then again, he wants to change his position, go back to work life. And he keeps on changing his position all through the week. For a few days in a week, he works, then another few days in a week, he tries to enjoy life. and he gets bored with it. Then he goes back to work life. He gets bored with the work life. He goes back to, your holiday or the retreat, like that. Because of which a person is never satisfied and his longing continues. And that is how Prabhupada defines the nature of the mundane rasa. And it is this why this mundane rasa is criticized, because it is not forever. Prabhupada says, even if you're deriving some rasa, but because you're not deathless, and the same Supreme Personality of Godhead, who appears to non-devotees as Yamaraj at the time of death, takes away everything from the person and forces that person to leave everything behind. So therefore, mundane rasa may give some pleasure, yet it is temporary. And because of the nature of this rasa is being spoken about Chapala Sukh, just an example, I'm not indicating for the Vaishnava communities or for the Vaishnavas, but you might see in the news and social media platform quite often these days, when a man and woman gets married, there's a lot of halla gulla around their marriage, isn't it? They will have pictures taken with the biggest smile they could ever make. And then after 2 weeks, they have another pictures which are published with a divorce note. And then they end up in divorce. Many examples, isn't it? Why I'm quoting this example? Because I remember seeing one interesting post. And that interesting post was on Facebook by a frustrated friend of a couple. So this particular couple had got married 6 months ago. And, they have this called as bridal photo shooting or something. There are some other activities goes around with shooting, taking photos. So this particular young man and woman, when they were getting married, they were too much halla gulla about the marriage. They were every day a lot of updates, photos and whatnot, so which was definitely taking time of other viewers who were looking at the photographs. And after 6 months, unfortunately, this couple ended up with a divorce. So this particular lady who had been following up this couple, the happy smiling couple, when she got the news that this young couple have got divorced, she became so frustrated. She said, how dare you get divorced without our permission? You guys wasted our so much time in sharing your photos and making us watch your photos every day. Now you have got divorced. How dare you do so? That's just a side point, but I was kind of reminded of that. Interestingly, when a man and woman gets married in today's time, they're so happy. And after a while, they find it unbearable to be with each other. Again, as I said, not in devotee communities, but outside you find it. That is the nature of mundane rasa. Whatever you get, let's say somebody has been desiring to get an iPhone. For how long would you be happy with that iPhone? People get bored with it, then they want something else. So that's the point Prabhupada makes about mundane rasa here, that it is never, satisfying like that. And bhoga tyaga. Now, Prabhupada will compare this mundane rasa with a spiritual rasa. And an example can be given for that. A mundane rasa can be like chewing a bamboo stick. And a spiritual rasa is like chewing a sugar cane stick. Both looks like similar, right? A bamboo stick and a sugar cane stick. As somebody is chewing a bamboo stick, he cannot find any rasa. It's a waste of time. Whereas a sugar cane stick actually has rasa, actually has nectar. And that is how Srila Prabhupada compares the mundane rasa with the spiritual rasa. We can continue reading where we ended there, because Prabhupada will speak more on the spiritual rasa. Mother Sri Lakshmi, you can read out.
Bhakti rasa, however, the mellow relished in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, does not finish with the end of life. It continues perpetually and is therefore called amrita, that which does not die but exists eternally. This is confirmed in all Vedic literatures. Bhagavad Gita says a little advancement in Bhakti rasa can save the devotee from the greatest danger, that of missing the opportunity for human life. The rasas derived from our feelings in social life, in family life, or in the greater family life of altruism, philanthropy, nationalism, socialism, communism, etc., do not guarantee that one's next life will be as a human being. We prepare our next life by our actual activities in the present life. A living entity is offered a particular type of body as a result of his action in the present body. These activities are taken into account by the superior authority called a Daiva, or the authority of God. This Daiva is explained in Bhagavad Gita as the prime cause of everything, and in Srimad Bhagavatam it is stated that a man takes his next body by Daiva Netrena, which means by the supervision of the authority of the Supreme. In an ordinary sense, Daiva is explained as density. Daiva
Destiny.
supervision gives destinies. Daiva supervision gives us a body selected from 8,400,000 forms. The choice does not depend on our selection, but is awarded to us according to our destiny. If our body at present is engaged in the activities of Krishna consciousness, then it is guaranteed that we will have at least a human body in our next life. A human being engaged in Krishna consciousness, even if unable to complete the course of Bhakti Yoga, takes birth in the higher divisions of human society so that he can automatically further his advancement in Krishna consciousness. Therefore, all bona fide activities in Krishna consciousness are amrita or permanent. This is the subject matter of the Nectar of Devotion.
Going back to the slide deck, amrita. Bhakti Rasa, however, the mellow relish in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, does not finish with the end of life. It continues perpetually and is therefore called amrita, that which does not die but exists eternally. Please read out, Mother, if you can still speak.
Any action performed for the satisfaction of Krishna in this transcendental Bhakti Rasa stage of life can be relished perpetually. When one is thus engaged in devotional service, all varieties of rasas or mellows turn into eternity.
So, amrita, one is, it is eternal. It never dies, it never ends. Second meaning of amrita, which is being described, or amrit, which is being described here, is just Krishna says, Neha bhikramanasho sipatyavayana vidyate, or else, as he speaks upon in 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, wherever you end, or wherever you kind of leave the path of bhakti from in the next life, you begin from there. And the third and very important thing is the path of bhakti awards you liberation or eternal life. Like this, the meaning of word amrita has been given. With this, we'll go back at the book. I will not be referring the whole preface because there's a lot of things to read, but we'll read out some highlighted portion now. So that's the definition of Bhakti, Rasa, Amrita, and Sindhu means the ocean, which we have already discussed now. I'll just read out a few selected lines. There's no need for showing the slide here. Devotees can look into their books now. So from the next paragraph, reading the first few lines. This eternal engagement in Bhakti Rasa can be understood by a serious student upon studying the nectar of devotion. Adoption of Bhakti Rasa, Krishna consciousness, will immediately bring one to an auspicious life, freed from any kind of anxiety, and bless one with transcendental existence. Prabhupada, few lines in the same paragraph writes down the line, the process of devotional service as it is recommended in the Nectar of Devotion will gradually elevate one from the material condition of life to the spiritual status. When the purified senses are employed in the service of the Lord, one becomes situated in Bhakti Rasa, and any action performed for the satisfaction of Krishna in this transcendental Bhakti Rasa stage of life can be relished perpetually. When one is thus engaged in devotional service, all varieties of rasas or mellows turns into eternity. But before that to happen, we need to undergo the process of purification of senses. When our senses are purified, then we can experience the rasa or relationship with the Supreme Lord. Then we can find the joy in the chanting of the holy names of the Lord. Then we can experience, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, 10th chapter, verse number 9, Machchita madgata prana bodhiyanta parasparam katyantas chamam nityam tushyanti charamanti cha. So that is the stage of purified senses. So how do we come to that stage? Prabhupada says, in the beginning, one is trained according to the principles of regulation under the guidance of the Acharya, which is called as Sadhana Bhakti. Within Sadhana Bhakti, there are two stages. Why the Sadhana Bhakti, which is being described. Very important, one is trained according to the injunctions of scriptures and by the spiritual master. And then when one is elevated, devotional service becomes automatic and spontaneous eagerness to serve Krishna, which is called as Raganuga Bhakti. And there are 12 kinds of rasas, 5 primary and 7 secondary. Now, please read from the next paragraph. There's some very important discussion there. The basic principle of the living condition is that we have a general propensity to love somebody. Mother Rupali, please go ahead if you found that paragraph.
The basic principle of being condition, the basic principle of the living condition is that we have a general propensity to love someone. No one can live without loving someone else. This propensity is present in every living being. When an animal like a tiger has this loving propensity, at least in a dormant state, and it is certainly present in human beings. Missing point, however, is where repose our love so that everyone can become happy. At the present moment, human society just want to love his country, or family, or his personal self. But there is no information where repose the loving propensity so that everyone can become happy. That missing point is Krishna, and the nectar of devotion teaches us how to stimulate our original love for Krishna and how to be situated in that position where we can enjoy our blissful life.
So Prabhupada here in the last few paragraphs is making a very beautiful point. Two things. One is the unfulfilled love, and second, the missing point. What is a missing point? People are not understanding, they're just not getting the clue how to actually experience the fulfillment of life. And that Prabhupada says there's an unfulfilled love. The nature of a human being, nature of the living entity is to love, to receive love and to give love. Like Mother Teresa made this statement long ago, which I heard from one of the seniors, particularly His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj made in one of the classes particular point. In his public speeches, of course not in the Bhagavatam class, he made a point that how once Mother Teresa said that I've traveled all over the world and I've seen really, really poor people and I have met with many, many rich people. However, after meeting all of them, I realized the greatest starvation or the hunger, the greatest hunger is not the hunger of the belly. The greatest hunger is of the heart. There is an unending longing for love. And those who are rich, they have a far greater starvation or this hunger of love than those who are poor. So ultimately, it's not at the physical level, it's more at the emotional or the spiritual level where we don't experience this. So that's a point Prabhupada makes it. And very beautiful few points, few things that Prabhupada writes in the purport. So let's take a look, continue reading. Somebody else would like to read? Mother Rati Manjari. Go ahead, please.
In the primary stage, a child loves his parents, then his brothers and sisters, and he daily grows up, he begins to love his family, society, community, country, nation, or even the whole human society. But the loving propensity is not satisfied even by loving all human society. That loving propensity remains imperfectly fulfilled until we know who is the Supreme Beloved. Our love can be fully satisfied only when it is reposed in Krishna. This theme is the sum and substance of the nectar of devotion, which teaches us how to love Krishna in 5 different transcendental mellows.
Hare Krishna. Anyone else would like to read the last 2 paragraphs? Yes. Naveen Prabhu, go ahead.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes.
Our loving propensity expands just as a vibration of light or air expands, but we do not know where it ends. The nectar of devotion teaches us the science of loving every one of the living entities perfectly by the easy method of loving Krishna. We have failed to create peace and harmony in human society, even by such great attempts as the United Nations, because we do not know the right method. The method is very simple, but one has to understand it with a cool head. The nectar of devotion teaches all men how to perform the simple and natural method of loving Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If we learn how to love Krishna, then it is very easy to immediately and simultaneously love every living being. It is like pouring water on the root of a tree or supplying food to one's stomach. The method of pouring water on the root of a tree or supplying foodstuff to the stomach is universally scientific and practical, as every one of us has experienced.
So this analogy you all understand. So, water the root, not the branches. Go to the last 3 lines of the same paragraph. The nectar of devotion will teach us. Very powerful line.
The nectar of devotion will teach us how to turn the one switch that will immediately brighten everything everywhere. One who does not know this method is missing the point of life.
Please continue. Next paragraph.
As far as material necessities are concerned, the human civilization at the present moment is very much advanced in living comfortably, but still we are not happy because we are missing the point. The material comforts of life alone are not sufficient to make us happy. The vivid example is America, the richest nation of the world. Having all facilities for material comfort is producing a class of men completely confused and frustrated in life. I am appealing herewith to such confused men to learn the art of devotional service as directed in the Nectar of Devotion. And I am sure that the fire of material existence burning within their hearts will be immediately extinguished. The root cause of our dissatisfaction is that our dormant loving propensity has not been fulfilled despite our great advancement in the materialistic way of life.
Hare Krishna. So, Prabhupada continues speaking about the aims of the nectar of devotion. I really like this, such a profound statement Prabhupada write. I'm sure that the fire of material existence burning within their hearts will be immediately extinguished. What does it mean? What Prabhupada is indicating by it? That the fire of material existence burning within their hearts will be immediately extinguished. It refers to our state of consciousness where we are at the beginning, actually when we are, newly joined. We all would remember those days when our mind was too consumed with the desires, unlimited desires of enjoying this world. And because of which we were always in anxiety. But as we continue to practice bhakti, take to the process of bhakti more seriously and attentively, you would experience a change of heart. There's a change of desires. What we used to desire and long before are no more the same desire. Has anyone has that experience? There's a lot of shift in our desires, and that is the point Prabhupada is saying. Therefore, Prabhupada says in the next line, the nectar of devotion will give us practical hints how we can live in this material world perfectly, engage in devotional service, and fulfill all our desires in this life and the next. Coming to the last few lines of this paragraph, again a very important point. Real self-realization and realization of Krishna go together simultaneously. For example, Prabhupada says, this is often I quote, seeing oneself in the morning means seeing the sunshine also, or sunrise also. Without seeing the sunshine, no one can see himself. Similarly, unless one has realized Krishna, there is no question of self-realization. So Prabhupada in this one very simple analogy and example puts it for clear that those who think I am God, or they're realizing themselves to be God, and saying that I'm self-realized, is just not possible unless they have realization of the God first. And finally, the last paragraph, the first few lines, the last paragraph, the very first line, please mark it. The nectar of devotion is specifically presented for persons who are now engaged in the Krishna consciousness movement. And then the rest of the paragraph, Prabhupada offers his gratitude to all the devotees, particularly to His Grace Jayananda Prabhu, I believe, who had given his $5,000, which was for his medical treatment for the purpose of the publication of the book here. With that, we come to the conclusion of the preface. This was brief about it. Let's run through the introduction. Now, this is Prabhupada, kind of preface Prabhupada writing about, giving a brief about what is this book, Bhakti Rasa Sindhu. Now, introduction is written by Srila Rupa Goswami. Henceforward, it is Srila Rupa Goswami and Prabhupada. I hope I have spoken this point before. Summary study means Prabhupada is going to give you the gist of it. I made this point before also. This is not a scholarly presentation. Prabhupada have written this book particularly for the devotees, just like the Krishna book or the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, where Prabhupada presents the essential ideas in a summary format, not much details given. So, however, just to make a sense of it, although you may see this book as a very small book, but this is around 2400 shlokas. So you can imagine Bhagavad Gita, which is 700, which is 1/3 of this book, is double the size of this book, because Prabhupada have given purports here. The whole translations are there. But that's not the case. So that's the reason it becomes a little difficult in the beginning to comprehend what's going on. So let's take a look at it. So we're going to break it into pieces so it makes little sense. So introduction, which Srila Rupa Goswami writes for his book, there are 3 subject matters which he discusses. First is Mangala Charan, which is from verse number 1 to verse number 6. And then Srila Rupa Goswami himself gives a table of content. He will describe the whole table of content, in other words, index of the whole book, which is in a couple of verses. And then finally, before he ends introduction, he gives the most authoritative definition of pure devotional service. The last subject matter would be a discussion for the next time when we meet, but today we'll take these 2 things. So let's begin with it. I hope you have your book in your hand. Please keep it along with you, so you understand how the flow of the book is going on, okay? Otherwise, it becomes a little confusing. So now we are on the introduction. So what is Mangala Charan? Mangala Charan is generally meant to offer prayers. There are 3 objects which Mangala Charan accomplishes. The very first is, at least how Mangala Charan has been written by Srila Rupa Goswami, it defines the book's objective, which is given in the very first verse of Mangala Charan. We'll see that shortly. Second, Mangala Charan allows author to pay obeisances. And third, allows the readers to receive the blessings. Just like whenever we begin a program, we offer prayers. So that is also Mangala Charan, where we are offering prayers to seek blessings, to seek the mercy of Guru and Gauranga. So we offer prayers. So we are not exactly covering all the 3 points, but at least in our when we speak, we at least cover this point of offering prayers. So that's the aspect of Mangala Charan which is being addressed here. So this is the format which is generally used by any author within our disciplic line while writing a book. It will begin with the Mangala Charan. You read Chaitanya Charitamrita. There are verses after verses of offering prayers to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Nityananda Prabhu, Advaita, and like that it continues. So let's take a look. The very first verse of Bhakti Rasa amrita Sindhu. It goes as follows. Akhila Rasa amrita murti parasmar ruchirut taraka palihi kalita shama lalito radha preyan vidhur jayati. So what you see as a reference of Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya. So this is being quoted by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami in Chaitanya Charitamrita. But it is composed by Srila Rupa Goswami while writing Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Because, often we don't have, I do have the verse book with me, but if I have to give you a quotation where you can easily look at it, for that purpose, I have given this reference from Chaitanya Charitamrita. But however, this is a verse composed by Srila Rupa Goswami. What is the meaning of it? Prabhupada gives the meaning of it in the very first paragraph. So the very first paragraph of introduction is a translation of the first verse of Srila Rupa Goswami. Please, who would like to read out? First paragraph. Rishikesh Pankaj, go ahead.
Hare Krishna. The first paragraph, for the introduction, right?
Yes, please.
Invoking auspiciousness. Lord Shri Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the cause of all causes, the reservoir of all rasas, or relationships, which are called neutrality, passive adoration, servitorship, friendship, parenthood, conjugal love, comedy, compassion, fear, chivalry, ghastliness, wonder, and devastation. He is the supreme attractive form, and by his universal and transcendental attractive features, he has captivated all the gopis, headed by
Taraka, Palika, Shyama, Lalita, and ultimately Srimati Radharani. Let his lordship's grace be on us so that there may not be any hindrance in the execution of this duty of writing the nectar of devotion. Impelled by his divine grace, Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada.
So in your book, you can write down, mark it for yourself. The very first paragraph indicates the first verse of Srila Rupa Goswami. Because just like Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructed Srila Rupa Goswami to write, similarly Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur inspired Srila Prabhupada to write. Therefore, you see in the first paragraph, at the end of it, Srila Prabhupada is offering his respects to Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. You're understanding this bridge, right? This is the connection, the reason. So that's the first verse. Now let's take a look a little bit to the verse itself. There are two main things which have been described here. I'm spending some time on some important verses because these are very, very important verses for us to understand. Akhila Rasa amrita murti. Srila Rupa Goswami, in the very first verse, Mangala Charan had three aspects. The very first aspect is defining the objective of the book. And he describes and defines the objective of the book is Lord Shri Krishna. And who is that Krishna? Radha Priyan Vidurjayati, one who is very, very dear to Srimati Radharani. And what is his status or situation? Akhila Ras Amrita Murti. He is an embodiment of all rasas. So two things which have been highlighted in this verse. First, Krishna is the reservoir of all rasas. Why Krishna? Srila Prabhupada in Chaitanya Charitamrita speaks on this point about Krishna being the reservoir of all pleasures or rasa. And he makes a point about Vishnu. Why Krishna? Why not Vishnu? Prabhupada says Vishnu, Prabhupada gives an analogy, Lord Vishnu is like a high court judge, majestic, in a high position, who will deliver an order and everyone is supposed to follow. And that same Vishnu, who has been respected with great awe and reverence, with that same Vishnu or same high court judge goes back in his home. He has his own private life, where now not everyone sees him in that awe and reverence and with a majestic sense. Just like Prabhupada will give an example, the same high court judge, when he comes back to home, he becomes a horse for his grandson. And the grandson will sit on the back of the grandfather and, they say, Ghoda chal, chal, chal. And the same grandfather is a high court judge where everyone follows him. So therefore, Prabhupada says, Vishnu is not the embodiment of all rasas, because Krishna manifested or expanded himself in the Vishnu form for the purpose of creation, maintenance, and destruction of this material universe. Because the same circumcision get expanded as Lord Shiva, which is a destructive potency. So that's the first thing. Krishna is being reservoir of all rasa. So, and which particular Krishna being discussed about? Mathura Krishna, Dwarka Krishna, Vrindavan Krishna? No. Srila Rupa Goswami, when he's talking about Akhila Rasa Amrita Murti, he's also talking along with that the names of the gopis, which means which Krishna? It is Vrindavan Krishna, which is being addressed particularly by Srila Rupa Goswami as the embodiment of all rasas. Second point which is being highlighted in this verses, Krishna is the attractor of the gopis. So Srila Rupa Goswami talks about 5 different gopis according to the intensity of their affection for Krishna. Taraka, Palika, Shyama, Lalita, and Srimati Radharani. These are the 5 names that Srila Rupa Goswami has given in this verse. By Krishna's radiantly attractive features, Krishna subjugates Taraka and Palika, which means they get controlled by Krishna. Whereas Shyama and Lalita are part of Krishna's intimate circle. Whereas Srimati Radharani is dearest to Krishna, where he becomes Srimati Radharani's submissive lover. Radha Priyan, one who's attracted to Srimati Radharani. Such is the unrivaled power of her devotion. In other words, again, Akhila Rasamrita Murti, the definition, the objective of the book is to describe about the qualities of Vrindavan Krishna, who is the embodiment of all rasas and who is attractor of all the gopis. That is a point in the first verse. That is an objective of the book. Now, second verse, here Srila Rupa Goswami offers his respect to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu because it is he who inspired Rupa Goswami to write. And he says, Hridiyasya preranaya pavartitoham varako rupo api tasya hare padakamalam vande chaitanya devasya. This verse is quoted by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami in Madhya, 19 chapter 134 verse. Somebody please go ahead and read out the translation.
Okay, although I am the lowest of men and have no knowledge, the inspiration to write transcendental literatures about devotional service has been mercifully bestowed upon me. Therefore, I am offering my obeisances at the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who has given me the chance to write these books.
So here Srila Rupa Goswami, as being inspired by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is offering respects. And if you look into the book, please somebody read out the second paragraph, which is the translation of the second verse. Anshul Prabhu, go ahead. Here Srila Prabhupada, while offering respect to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu on behalf of Rupa Goswami, would also offer respect to Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. I hope you got the connection now. So, for example, if you're reading this book, you'll wonder, why Rupa Goswami talking about Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur? He did not even exist. It is Srila Prabhupada who is describing, who is writing, it's a summary. So he's expressing that. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of Srila Goswami Prabhupada and of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada, by whose inspiration I have been engaged in the matter of compiling this summary study of Bhakti Rasa Sindhu. This is the sublime science of devotional service as propounded by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who appeared 500 years ago in West Bengal, India, to propagate the movement of Krishna consciousness.
That's the next paragraph, right? No, that's it. We'll go back to the slide deck because we'll not have time to read everything. So that was a point about second verse. Now from the third to the fifth verse, where Srila Rupa Goswami continues to offer respects. So in the third verse, he offered respect to his elder brother, Sanatana Goswami, who he considered as his guru. And then in the fourth, he makes a very beautiful analogy where he compares devotees, pure devotees, to sharks swimming in the ocean. So let's read from the fourth paragraph, which is the fourth verse of Srila Rupa Goswami. So in third verse, he's offering respect to Sanatana Goswami, and the fourth verse, he's offering respects to all the devotees, where Srila Rupa Goswami compared the pure devotees to a shark. A very interesting analogy. Please make note of it. Sure shot, this is going to come in your exam. Huh? I'm upfront telling you the question that's going to come in your exam, where you'll be asked to explain this analogy. Please read out.
Let us offer our respectful obeisances to all the great devotees and acharyas, holy teachers, who are compared to the sharks in the great ocean of nectar and who do not care for the various rivers of liberation. Impersonalists are very fond of merging into the Supreme, like rivers that come down and merge into the ocean. The ocean can be compared to liberation, and the rivers to all the different parts of liberation. The impersonalists are dwelling in the river water, which eventually comes to mix with the ocean. They have no information, however, that within the ocean, as within the river, there are innumerable aquatic living entities. The sharks who dwell in the ocean do not care for the rivers which are gliding down into it. The devotees eternally live in the ocean of devotional service, and they do not care for the rivers. In the other words, those who are pure devotees always remain in the ocean of transcendental loving service to the Lord and have no business with the other processes, which are compared to the rivers that only gradually come to the ocean.
Hare Krishna. So who understood what is going on in the analogy? And the analogy doesn't end here. In the next verse, the analogy continues, where Srila Rupa Goswami would compare Mayavadis and their reputations to volcanic eruptions. But let's take a look at this analogy quickly. I believe I have the things on the slide. There are three things which are being mentioned in it. The very first thing, Srila Rupa Goswami says sharks live only in the ocean. Ocean is compared to, Prabhupada at one place is liberation, or you can consider as Bhakti, Rasa, amrita, Sindhu, what we're talking about it. Sharks, they do not swim in the rivers. They swim in the ocean. So river can be considered as, the path to ocean, because all the rivers come and merge in ocean. So although the river water is coming and getting merged into ocean, they never get attracted to river. So that's a shark. That is the pure devotees of the Lord, which has been described about. They do not get attracted to any lesser pleasures. Second, shark rejects the river. Shark rejects the river means the impersonalists, it is mentioned, Prabhupada writes, argue that the ultimate end of self-realization is to merge with the Supreme, as the river ultimately merges with the ocean. In other words, they compare themselves with the river. Prabhupada says, no, that's a fault in the understanding. Actually, they are like a fish in the river, where river is compared to the path of self-realization. So when the fish into that river, when the river comes and merges with the ocean, the fish does not lose its identity. The fish continues to survive. The river may merge with the ocean, but the fish in the river do not. They enter the ocean and experiences variegated forms and entities. So therefore, the real destination of self-realization is not to merge with Supreme, but to enter into the realm of the Supreme. Into the realm of Supreme is into the the inner circle of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, where the Lord exists in many, many forms. And the third thing which Srila Rupa Goswami mentions, sharks are never caught by the fisherman's net. Fisherman's net is compared to the snares of birth and death, because the sharks, they swim in the deep waters, and therefore they never get caught by the fisherman. That's how with these three things, Srila Rupa Goswami compares pure devotees to the shark. They never get attracted to the river. They only live in the ocean, and they're never caught by the fisherman's net, but they never have to undergo birth, death, old age, and disease like that. And then in the fifth verse, which is the next paragraph, please somebody read out now.
Srila Rupa Goswami prays to his spiritual master, Srila Sanatana Goswami, for the protection of Bhakti Rasa amrita Sindhu, the ocean of the pure nectar of devotional service, from the argumentative logicians who unnecessarily meddle in the science of service to the Lord. He compares their arguments and logic to volcanic eruptions in the midst of the ocean. In the midst of the ocean, such volcanic eruptions can do very little harm. And similarly, those who are against devotional service to the Lord and who put forward many philosophical theses about the ultimate transcendental realization cannot disturb this great ocean of devotional service.
So here he is praying to Sanatana Goswami and is comparing all this, void reputations, which are just simply a disturbance to the devotees, to a volcanic eruptions. Just like in an ocean bed, there are many volcanoes which erupt, but it does not disturb the ocean. Similarly, their bogus philosophy, let it not disturb the devotees. Like that, Srila Rupa Goswami speaks in the fifth verse. And now in the sixth verse, he offers benedictions, as well as it shows the humility of Srila Rupa Goswami, humble demeanor of Srila Rupa Goswami. And Prabhupada says something very important in the next paragraph, which gives the meaning of this sixth verse. So please somebody read out. Okay, Harinam Krishna Prabhu, go ahead. Next paragraph.
The author of Bhakti Rasa amrita Sindhu, Srila Rupa Goswami, very humbly admits that he is just trying to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world, although he humbly thinks himself unfit for his work. That should be the attitude of all preachers of the Krishna conscious movement, for success of Srila Rupa Goswami. We should never think of ourselves as great preachers, but should always consider that we are simply instrumental to the previous acharyas, and simply by following in their footsteps, we may be able to do something for the benefit of suffering humanity.
Yes. So Prabhupada makes a very beautiful point that this should be the mood and attitude of all preachers of the Krishna consciousness movement. And through the sixth prayer or the sixth verse, he actually offers a benediction in the sense, let the readers of this book attain to the transcendental bliss, as it is the objective of this book. And now from the seventh verse onwards, Srila Rupa Goswami will give the index, the table of contents, which is called as Granth Vibhaga. Etasya Bhagavad Bhakti Rasamrit Payonitihe Chatvara Khalu Vakshante Bhaga Purvadhyaya Kramat. This is the seventh verse. This nectarian milk ocean of devotional service to the Supreme Personality Godhead will be described in 4 sections or directions: eastern, southern, western, and northern section. Like this. So, Srila Rupa Goswami have divided this Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu into 4 sections, 4 khandas, if you want to call it, who he identifies as the eastern side, southern side, western side, and northern side. So, all of you, please go to the index, your table of content. Do you see 4 sections there? That is the whole thing, where he has classified this book into 4 sections or khandas. Got it? Let's go ahead now. Next, in the next verse, Srila Rupa Goswami says, Tatra purva vibhagesmin bhakti bheda nirupake anukramena vyaktavyam laharinam chatushtayam. Now, after describing the 4 sections, 4 khandas or the 4 sections of this book, now he speaks about the first khanda, where he says there are 4 laharis, because he's considered this book to be an ocean, the eastern side of the ocean, the southern side, the western side, and the northern side. And the eastern side, in the verse 8, he says there are 4 laharis, 4 waves, in which the different types of devotional services will be described. So what are these 4 waves? We'll take a look right away. And then in the 9th verse, Srila Rupa Goswami says, Adya samanya bhaktyatya dvitya sadhanantita bhavashri trityacha turya prema nirupika. Now he describes what are these 4 laharis. So all of you, please go to the table of content. In the very first section, you see 19 chapters, right? Now, this is not how Srila Rupa Goswami have given. Srila Rupa Goswami have not made 19 chapters like this. It's not like that. Srila Rupa Goswami, for him, is a one eastern direction, where there are 4 sub-themes are being discussed. So, I'm going to tell you which theme covers to what chapter, so you're able to highlight this, okay? Going back to the verse again. The first wave describes devotional service in general, which refers to the first chapter. We'll see that. I believe I have the exact note in the next slide. The second wave lists the prescriptions for regulated devotional service. In the third wave, devotional service in ecstasy. And the fourth wave, the pure love of Godhead, which means, so overview of devotion. Samanya Bhakti is the first chapter in the Prabhupada content. Devotional service in practice, sadhana, is from chapter number 2 to chapter number 16. Then devotional service in bhava, chapter number 17 and 18. And devotional service in love of God, prema, is the 19th chapter. These are the 4 laharis. Are you all on the same page? You have to make your notes. If you don't make notes, it goes off the head. Otherwise, you can refer to the presentation. So, overview of Purva Vibhaga, you can see it in this ways. Laharis, Samanya Bhakti, that is our introduction in the first chapter. Then 2nd to 16th chapter is Sadhana Bhakti. 17 and 18 is Bhava Bhakti. And the 19th is Prema Bhakti. Got it now? This is how your content of the first section looks like. To make it more simpler, I'll just run through with certain slides. How does the content looks like? Srila Rupa Goswami says this book has 4 sides: Eastern, Southern, Western, and Northern. Our syllabus for Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu for the part of Bhakti Shastri would only be to cover the eastern side. Okay, we're only going to read 19 chapters. So eastern side describes varieties of devotional service, which is Vaidhi, Sadhana Bhakti, and Raganuga, and Vaidhi Bhakti, and Prema Bhakti, which is called as Sadhana, Sadhya, and Prema. We'll take a look at it. So devotional service in 4 waves. First is Samanya Bhakti, which covers of introduction, definition of pure devotional service. We are right now on introduction. We are here. In the next session, we're going to talk about the definition, okay? So you know where we are right now. And then chapter 1 continues, which will talk about the 6 characteristics. Then the second chapter, onwards up to 16th chapter, talks about Sadhana Bhakti, which is our stage, following the Bhakti under the direction of spiritual master and according to the injunctions of scriptures. So very, very important chapters for us. Then third is in Bhava stage, and fourth is Prema. Now, what is the difference in Bhava and Prema? That I'll discuss when we are progressing with the subject matter. So what is the subject matter of chapter 2 to chapter 16? Let's begin into chapter 2 to chapter 6. I cannot really speak about all of this. I'm just highlighting it out. I'll just briefly read it out. What are the contents? So all of you are a little bit excited about what's going to come. In chapter 2, there will be a discussion on Sadhana Bhakti, where Sadhana Bhakti and Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti would be discussed. Chapter 3 will discuss about eligibility for Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, which means how does anyone comes to take to Bhakti? How a person can take to the path of Bhakti? What inspires some and because why others are not able to take to Bhakti? There will be discussion. And also the eligibility. Then chapter 4, those who are eligible and reject Bhakti and Mukti. Chapter number 3 will also talk about 3 types of devotees as a part of eligibility. Fourth, those who are eligible for Bhakti, they do not give any attention to Bhakti and Mukti. Fifth, Srila Rupa Goswami gives evidences from numerous scriptures about how Bhakti is self-sufficient and independent and is the highest. All kind of Shastras. So this chapter 5 is nothing but quotations after quotations after quotations. Chapter number 6 talks about 64 items, practices of Sadhana Bhakti. So we'll see that later on, rest of the details. Then chapter 7 to 12 is a detailed explanation of the 64 items of Bhakti. All of you would be surprised that the program that Srila Prabhupada has given to us of morning program. If anyone attends the complete morning program, starting with the Mangalarti, taking darshan of the Lord, attending Mangalarti, Nasimati, Tosiyarti, chanting the 16 rounds, then Guru Puja, Darshanarti, Bhagavatam class, concluding with Krishna Prasadam. If you do this much right in the morning program, you have actually taken part in more than 50 items of 64 items that Srila Rupa Goswami talks about. So now are you getting how important is a morning program? If somebody just attends the whole morning program, you have covered more than 75% to 80% of the 64 items which Srila Rupa Goswami talks about. Of course, we cannot practice all the 64 items. Therefore, Srila Rupa Goswami gives the 5 main important aspects of 64 items. Going back. Then 13th chapter, what are these? Avoiding the details here of what all will be discussed, like that. Chapter 13 will talk about the 5 most potent forms that can evoke bhava even in a neophyte out of the 64. And then 14, 15, 16 talks about varnashrama, other path, jnana, vairagya, like that. 15 begins to speak about ragatmika. 16 raganuga, spontaneous, like that. And 17, 18 and 19 are part of bhava and prema. So these are the part of sadhana bhakti. And ahead, this is in summary I'm giving you. Srila Rupa Goswami gives a whole table of content. Please go to your book, look at part number 2 in your book. That's a southern side, which gives the overview of rasa. Generally, we don't study at this stage but gradually down the years, after a few years, more years of practice, then we can read it. At least those who have read Bhagavatam then can read it. And then the third part is the western side, where the primary rasas, there are 5 primary rasas, Shanta, Dasya, Sakya, Vasalya, and Madhurya rasa described. And the last part, northern side, describe the secondary rasas, secondary 7 rasas, laughter, astonishment, chivalry, compassion, anger, distorted mallows, fear, ghostliness, ghastliness, and mixture of mallows. Like this, Srila Rupa Goswami concludes his table of contents. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol. Are you all okay? और अभी सिर में चक्कर चल रहा है अभी सबके, क्या हुआ ये? So I hope things are okay. इससे ज़्यादा आसान क्या बनाऊंगा मैं? And after giving the table of content, then Srila Rupa Goswami gives the most authoritative definition of bhakti. We'll just recite it today, but we'll read the meaning next time. Srila Rupa Goswami says, Anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karmadhyanavrtam anukulyena krishnanu shilanam bhaktiruttamaha. This will be a discussion because it will require some time and attention. We'll do that next time when we meet. With this, we conclude our today's discussion with a beautiful quote from Srila Prabhupada. So, this Krishna consciousness movement is to give chance to everyone to hear about Krishna. This is the first process, Shravanam. And when one has heard very nicely about Krishna, then he can speak about Krishna. And he must speak. You cannot remain without speaking. That is the result of Shravanam. Shravanam, Kirtanam. One who has heard nicely, he must speak or preach. Other way around, to be able to speak Krishna conscious philosophy, one must be well versed. And the meaning of well versed is must have heard attentively from spiritual authorities. With this, we come to the conclusion of today's discussion. Let's take a look briefly through again a table of index. What does the preface speaks about? Preface speaks about the history of Srila Rupa Goswami as well as history of Nectar devotion. History of Nectar devotion, we are Rupanugas, Parampara from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Apart from that, Prabhupada talks about the purpose of Nectar devotion. The 6 purposes Prabhupada highlights of Nectar devotion. First is to make everyone, all the practicing devotees as Goswamis. Haribol, all the best. Okay, that's the first purpose. Second, to explain what is Bhakti Ras versus mundane Rasa. Then third, practical hints to live in material world by devotional service. This book helps us. Fourth, to stimulate original love in 5 different ras: Shanta, Dasya, Sakya, Vasalya, Madhurya. Fifth, science of perfectly loving all living entities. And the 6th, nurture the devotional service of practicing devotees. Bhakti Ras versus Bhautik Ras. Bhakti means seva. Bhakti means devotion. Devotion means service. It means an activity which is intended to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the meaning of love, like that. Second, these are more details of it. Rasa means juice. Then there was a discussion on mundane ras versus bhakti ras. Mundane ras has 2 features, 2 attributes, chapala sukha and bhoga tyaga. Whereas bhakti rasa is fresh and everlasting, eternal. Amrita means eternal and Sindhu means ocean of pleasure. We may manage to procure a few drops of sense pleasure, but there is an entire ocean of nectar devotion easily available to all. By understanding nectar devotion, we can dive deeply into that ocean, as Srila Prabhupada writes. And in the introduction, what we have seen so far, introduction, there are 3 themes. First is Mangala Charan, then there is a content of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and third is the definition of pure devotional service. Mangalacharan, there are 6 verses. First, the objective of the book has been described. That is nothing but Akhila Rasamrit Murti Krishna, and which has 2 meanings. One, he is the reservoir of all pleasure. Second, he is attractor of gopis. Reservoir of all pleasure, we discussed Vishnu versus Krishna, judge versus, judge at office and judge at home. There are 5 gopis which are described by Srila Rupa Goswami. And then obeisances, he offers his respects to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, like this, and Vaishnavas. And Vaishnavas, he compares them to sharks. 3 things, they do not get attracted to anything else than to devotion. They reject rivers of liberation, and they're never caught by fishermen of birth and death. And finally, he gives the benediction. What is that? First, protection from volcanoes of argumentative logicians. One who has read Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he will not get distracted by, so-called spiritual books, but introducing some mundane subjects. And it is free from impersonalistic misconceptions. So far, this is what we have discussed, and of course the contents that I have already shown you before. Next time when we meet, there will be a discussion on the definition of pure devotional service. Along with that, we'll also begin our chapter 1, where 6 characteristics of Samanya Bhakti are being mentioned. With that, I pause for today. Hare Krishna. Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada ki, Srila Rupa Goswami ki, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu ki jai.